Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans, a stabby chaos coordinator, and one chief shenanigator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunctions. Without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Robert J. Sawyer, introduce himself to our listeners, viewers at home.
Well, hi, my name is indeed Robert J. Sawyer, and I'm a Canadian science fiction writer. I live in Toronto, Canada. Best novel Hugo Award winner, best novel Nebula Award winner, the ABC TV series from 2009-2010 called Flash Forward was based on my novel of the same name, and I was one of the script writers for that show. I was guest of honor at the World Science Fiction Convention in 2023, and I just love, I was making my living as a science fiction writer, but I'm a fan way before I was a writer, and I just love this genre.
Okay, we're gonna do.
Go ahead, Jair.
We're gonna be, true to self, and we're gonna go to like the Foodcast episode again, and I'm gonna ask you, when you were working with the movie studios, what was it like at the craft service table? Was it as good as Hollywood makes it say in the bit little jokes?
Well, it varies from production to production. It's absolutely up to the showrunner and the executive producer to choose. Now, Flash Forward, our executive producer and showrunner was David S. Goyer, who had written Batman Begins and directed various films. And now it was recently a showrunner on a Foundation series. But he said, we will spend big on craft services. He was a big believer that a crew, and we had a crew of a cast and crew and office staff, about 200 on Flash Forward, that if people are well fed, they will give their best performance and they will feel valued, that it's a small expense compared to, having people being sluggish in the afternoon. They're hungry, they're irritable because they didn't enjoy their lunch. So we always had, lavish meals. And the craft services table, which is adjacent to whatever sets you're filming on, was always extremely well stocked with first-rate stuff. And I give full credit to David S. Goyer for that.
All right. I've always wondered, because, when you see the movies where they go meta and it's a movie theater set in a movie theater, it could go either way, but there's never a middle ground.
It's completely a budget item, right? And they decide, you've got the network or the studio or the streamer says, this is the budget. We don't break it down for you. You break it down as the producers, and you decide what you're going to prioritize. And, looking after your cast and crew is the best thing you can do. Make everybody feel that they're valued, right? It's just ideal.
Totally. So, Jenna, you were going to ask something? We started at the same time. Uh-oh, she froze.
She froze.
She's
doing her crochet there or knitting.
Yeah, she's thinking about that craft service table. Is what it is. Frozen.
But with my magic spell, since it's a fantasy podcast, Jenna, unfreeze. I'm a science fiction writer, so I know magic doesn't work. She's still frozen.
Okay, well, while we wait for her to come back, I'll say, because this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we do have the religion questions. So are you ready for this, sir?
You bet.
All right, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
100% Star Trek, and particularly the original series, which of course is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year. But that's what made me a science fiction writer. I loved the show. I wrote the 2-part series finale for the fan film series, Star Trek Continues. You can find it on YouTube. It also has its own dedicated site, StarTrekContinues.com. I just love Star Trek.
Okay, I didn't know there was a fan-made film. I know normally, as far as branding goes, like Star Wars tends to be pretty permissive on the fan stuff because they found a legal way around protecting their rights.
And Star Trek was, or Paramount, CBS, the owners of IP, intellectual property, was until a guy named Alec Peters came along, raised over $1 million on crowdfunding, and went ahead and did 2 things that were huge no-nos. The first was, he said, we are creating the first fully professional, independent Star Trek film. Well, you can't do that. When we did, we were all professionals who worked on Star Trek Continues. professional scriptwriter, professional actors, but we were doing it as a labor of love. And we
Right.
never for 1 second said it was anything more than a fan film. The second thing he did is he actually went and cast people who had been in Star Trek, in particular Gary Graham, who had played on Enterprise, Ambassador Soval, the Vulcan ambassador, to play the same part. So he's making a Star Trek show with real Star Trek actors, with money he's raised from fans, and CBS Paramount doesn't get a cut. Well, that's not going to fly. And the lawyers came down on him, excuse me, quite rightly, for, just flagrant violation of their intellectual property. And that kind of screwed the pooch for all of us. But the good people at CBS licensing really liked Star Trek Continues. And we were doing hour-long episodes, and they said, okay, you got to hurry up and get them done, but we're not going to drop the hammer on you guys until you finish what you were doing, which was the last year of Kirk's 5-year mission to get to the finale I wrote, where Kirk, Spock, and McCoy end up at the places they are at the beginning of Star Trek, the motion picture. So the explanation, for instance, in my scripts, To Boldly Go Part 1 and 2, of why Spock wanted to purge all remaining emotion. That certainly wasn't the way we left them at the end of the last of the 79 original episodes. The tragedy that led him to do that, the tragedy that led to McCoy to resign and go into private practice, and the tragedy that led Kirk to take an earthbound desk job, which is where they all are at the beginning of that movie, Star Trek motion picture. Great joy to write that. But CBS Paramount liked us, and we played absolutely in the rules of their sandbox. But now there are huge constraints. You can't make hour-long Star Trek episodes anymore. You can make, I think it's a maximum of 2 15-minute segments of a story. So,
yeah, I recognize that there's the universal law of intellectual property, or IP laws. If you don't defend it, you lose it. Yes. And Star Wars, for instance, when you can sell the merchandise, the stormtrooper armor for the fan club, etc., they get around that because you're not actually selling the IP; you're selling the labor to build it, the cost of materials.
Right.
And so there are ways if you can legally finesse it, but they had to find a way to justify to protect their IP. Star Trek fans tend not to be like wearing. I mean, there are costumes, but those tend to be more homemade. Right. It was more the fan-made stories and movies, and so it gets weird with the legal, and I don't fault them for protecting their IP. It's certainly
they have to protect it, because what would have stopped, given that same thing, we're making an independent, fully professional Star Trek film, what would have stopped, other than his ethics, William Shatner going and saying, hey, kickstart my William Shatner Star Trek film, The Return of Captain Kirk, with CBS getting not a piece of it, right? Of course, Shatner would not do that. I was lucky enough to work with Bill 25 years ago on a TV project. But the idea that some arrogant punk could come along and say, we're going to do that, we're going to, cut them out of the pie. You can't do that. It's IP. I protect my IP,
absolutely
26 novels very assiduously, because you have to. As you say, if you don't police your intellectual property, there are those who will claim that you've abandoned it. And various terms do get abandoned because they weren't protected. In some markets, Kleenex is not protected. In some markets, Band-Aid is not protected. They become generics.
Yeah, and one of the things that makes it even more complicated for fans of Trek when you watch even the professionally made stuff is the license is split between 2 companies. And so
really also now 3, because Bad Robot is involved, the JJ.
Oh, I did not know that. But yeah, it gets weird.
Was the reason we had a desert for many years after Enterprise with no TV Star Trek, because he said, I will agree to make Star Trek movies, but there can't be any competition on TV. I'm trying to make summer blockbusters. I can't pack, the local multiplex if you are giving away Star Trek on TV.
Right.
So he was the reason that there was that hiatus between Enterprise, which went off the air, if I remember correctly, in 2004, until we got Discovery, right? And now we're in another hiatus because of course, Paramount having been sold and so forth. So we'll see.
Yeah, I liked Enterprise. I liked Deep Space Nine. I wasn't so much a fan of all. There were episodes that I liked of The Next Generation. I liked the first black and white episodes of the original series where it was Pike and they were like their away team uniforms. I wish they did more
They were
with
black and white because you had a black and white TV, my friend. They were all shot in color, including both pilots.
Really?
Yeah, really. Check them out. They're gorgeous. I mean, they just announced a 60th anniversary Blu-ray set.
Okay.
And it's the same Blu-ray masters they've had for more than a decade. But my God, on Blu-ray, it just looks spectacular. There's so much picture information in 35 millimeter film frames that even at Blu-ray resolution.
I've watched it. I watched it because it's in the public domain. I watched it for free on YouTube, and they showed it in black and white.
Well, Star Trek is not in the public domain, but there may be
so it was pirated then. I did not know that.
Pirated. And sometimes pirates, there are two things that pirates do. They knock it down to black and white so that the bots that crawl to find plagiarism can't find it because the picture information is extremely different than what they're looking for, or they flip it left to right. You'll often see that where a pirated thing is put up and the image has been flipped left to right. But yeah, no, there's no free Star Trek on YouTube. It's on Paramount Plus is where it streams currently.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. I go out of my way not to, and the site I saw it generally plays the public domain old stuff, like the old World War II movies that are all free and clear.
Yeah.
But then again, it's such a complicated field that if you're not a lawyer, it's easy to make mistakes,
absolutely.
Which is why, generally speaking, most of the time they don't go after you hard. The first step is always, hey, if you didn't know this was against the rules, stop it. And they generally give you a chance to fix it. Like, I can't remember what the name was that we picked the first time. But the first name we picked for the Blasters and Blades was actually protected IP by the Mech Wars game.
Oh, yeah.
Oops.
And their lawyer was like, here, let me help you find something that doesn't violate anyone's IP. Right. And they were pretty chill about it. So I really like the company's IP lawyer because he was pretty cool about it. It was an old one that they didn't use anymore, but they were still protecting it for future projects. So yeah, it's definitely something to think about. That's kind of cool though. And since you mentioned the 60th anniversary is coming up, we will this will air in August, dear listener. But before the end of the year, this spring or this fall, excuse me, we will do a panel on the Star Trek, the 60th anniversary. And we'll definitely invite you back for that one since you're
I love it. I love
got a love affair with it.
TOS, as we call it, the original series. Love talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I was just at, in Ticonderoga, New York, speaking of fan films, they made for a fan film series originally called Star Trek New Voyages and later rebranded as Star Trek Phase 2, a complete recreation of the sets as they were in 1960s at Desilu.
Nice.
And I was just there July now, so last month, for their 60th anniversary celebration, doing programming. And next month, which will be August, which is, I know when this is going to air, I'll be at Star Trek Las Vegas, the big national, or I should say international, Star Trek convention, also doing panels and discussions about this show that I love.
I might have to see if I can track down some of the people that sell. And I didn't realize, because I grew up reading the what is now considered extended lore in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
But reading the books, I didn't realize that Star Trek ever had books out in the world.
Yes.
Before Star Wars did, indeed.
Yeah, and so until I started doing this podcast when we rebranded, I didn't even realize those were a thing. So I might see if I can track down some of those authors if they're still around for the 60th anniversary.
There are guys who are they're still being produced on a monthly basis.
I'll have to see if we can invite some of those. Absolutely, that could be a good, interesting.
Greg Cox, Keith DeCandido, Dayton Ward. These are some of the current writers who are doing fabulous Star Trek novels.
Oh, yeah.
We'll try to keep
Jana,
we'll keep Jana from fangirling out on that one.
No, you can't keep me from fangirling out on that. They had some just amazing people that they got on to write these tie-in novels and then to write novels that, adventures of Star Trek that we never got to see because they came up with them. But it fits so nicely in the universe. You can tell these are people who were so passionate about what Trek meant and what the characters meant. And that's another fascinating discussion, is the difference between William Shatner, the actor, and Captain James T. Kirk, the character. Because you can poke at Shatner all day long about certain acting choices and whatever. But what James T. Kirk stands for as a character is fascinating. And so, yeah, the books really can play with that because you're not locked into a particular actor, a particular this, that, and the other. They just take that heart of who are these characters and what is this crew together. And so I love the work that they do for the novels.
I actually found out about the novels from when we interviewed Kristen Catherine Rush.
Great friend of mine.
She's
next month in Vegas, I'll see Chris. And
yeah, so
Dean Wesley Smith, who's also written Star Trek novels.
Right, and she was the one who told me that my general complaint about Star Trek being too clean, because anybody who's been in the field ever, camping, whatever, nothing's ever that clean. She said the books fixed all of that. All of the complaints that people had about the series, and some of that was just production choice more than plot choice. She's like, the books answered all of that and then some. And she said, if you want lived in, the books will give it to you. Because that was my complaint, was the universe never felt lived in when I was watching The Next Generation. Because that's what was around when I was a kid, was The Next Generation.
Yeah, Next Generation looked so pristine. Absolutely, for sure. Yeah.
It's very shiny.
So
shiny is a great word. That's right.
And because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
Narnia. I know George Martin. And I'm delighted for all of his success. I actually much prefer his science fiction work to his fantasy work. Sand Kings is a brilliant science fiction novella by him. It was adapted. I can't remember if it was Outer Limits or Twilight Zone. A very good adaptation was done of it. But I am not a huge reader of fantasy, but some of my best friends are fantasy writers. Charles DeLint, Tanya Huff. Julie Ternada now writes a lot of fantasy. Guy Gabriel Kay. I'm just naming some of the Canadian names that are well. Stephen Erickson. His real name is Steve Linden. Just fabulous writers. The richness of the prose. There's something very sumptuous that you get in a lot of fantasy writing that simply isn't appropriate to writing about a technological future. You don't expect Baroque or Victorian language.
Right.
It doesn't really work unless you're writing steampunk. But it works beautifully in fantasy. So the thing I enjoy most about fantasy is just some of the lovely sentence crafting that some of my colleagues do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So one of the crying shames of adulthood is we stop asking each other the important question. And thanks to the generosity of our sponsors, we are bringing that back. I'm going to ask you, sir, what is your favorite dinosaur?
Well, I love this guy right here. This is Stegosaurus.
Oh, and excellent choice.
I thank you. I love Stegosaurus for a whole bunch of reasons. And I have probably 50 or so Stegosaurus models scattered around the apartment in various
I love those.
Shapes and sizes.
It's so cute.
And Stegosaurus, when I was a kid in the 1960s, they actually thought Stegosaurus had two brains. You would find that in the literature. It's this little tiny brain in the head here, and there was a opening or spacing above the hips in the spinal cord. And people argued, well, it's too dumb, that tiny little brain, like the size of a chestnut in here, to control what we all call now the thagomizer, right? The spikes at the end, based on Gary Larson's Far Side, calling it the thagomizer. And I thought that was so cool, two brains. Well, it turned out later paleontological interpretation is it's a glycogen pump, just to get, sugared, a storage of sugared energy that can be used to pump into the tail when it needs to move, slow-moving, dull-witted animal. But I love that. I love that it's a herbivore. It doesn't hurt anybody. I love that it looks unlike anything that exists in the world today. You can look at a brontosaur, a sauropod, and say, okay, it's got a long neck, but the body's very elephantine. This is an alien creature. So I love it for its alienness. I love it for its passive herbivoreness. I love it for the thagomizer, and I love it because they used to say it had two brains. But number one, by all means, for me, Stegosaurus. My only tragedy is that Stegosaurus is not known from Canada, where I live.
Yeah, it's the Stegosaurus and the Triceratops were my two favorites. As
It's my wife's favorite is Triceratops.
Your wife has excellent taste.
Yeah, I'm
So-
sticking with my raptors. Thank you very much.
That's just because they're from Utah.
Well, yes, it's the home court advantage issue because the Utah Raptors are big and fierce, and they named the
Utah's just
submarine
great
after them.
fossil hunting.
So
Yeah, great
yes,
fossil
it's
hunting
great
territory.
country. Mhm. I used to do that when I was a kid, and we'd go up and we'd find trilobites and we'd find all of the other
Oh, yeah.
things, and you can just walk up into the mountains if you know where you're going. And my grandfather was a geologist, and so that was, let's go fossil hunting today. Okay.
Spectacular. Where I live in Ontario, the glaciers scraped off a lot of the higher level stuff. So we don't have anything from the age of dinosaurs here. It's all not Mesozoic, but Paleozoic.
Mhm.
Oh, well, but trilobites and, other great things for sure.
Yeah. But you have maple, so that's good.
We do. We absolutely do.
Oh, and you have good food up there. I've visited Toronto a couple of times, and Tim Hortons, there are donuts there that I may have a long distance love affair with that I'm
Yes.
not revealing to my husband because, wow, those were good.
Yes,
I'm hungry.
I like Tim Hortons donuts, but I must say I often will go there for a bagel and cream cheese. They do a great bagel and cream cheese. So
Oh, I didn't try the bagels because
Now you are a Commonwealth country, so do you do the bagel, cream cheese, and jelly or jam or whatever like the Brits do in Canada?
no. So there's a famous saying about Canada. I wish it was mine, but it's not. It is that Canada could have had French cuisine, British culture, and American know-how. And instead we ended up with British cuisine, French know-how, and American culture. And, but we draw the line at some of the excesses of the Brits. So, we look at bangers and mash, and we look at, some of the things that they eat, and we go, no, not even for us, right? So no, just cream cheese, maybe garlic and herb cream cheese on an everything bagel, toasted, chef's kiss.
Okay. Because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes. I'm going to ask you, sir, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
I don't drink either. I've never really liked hot beverages. And so
Okay.
I was a huge Coke Zero drinker. But
Okay.
5 months ago, yesterday, I quit it after drinking way too much. It was just too acidic. I didn't like the taking in all the artificial sweeteners. So what I'm drinking right now, mostly, this is Gatorade Zero carbs, 0 calorie, electrolyte water.
Okay. I mean,
Not a paid product placement. I just like the stuff.
No, it's just yummy. That's
one of the good things that comes out of Florida. So,
Yes, absolutely right.
but
during the summertime, it's
outlet,
really
yeah.
good for you.
the other weird thing that's coming out of Florida is the evolution of the coyotes. I don't know if you guys have been following that.
That's because coyotes are awesome.
I like coyotes. We had them right here in my neighborhood. We have a couple of coyotes.
So coyotes have been being forced out of their natural habitat just because of humans. And so in Florida and in the Texas areas, they've been evolving. If it wasn't caught on trail cams, no one would believe it. They have python issues, which they have no natural predators because they were released by humans into the Everglades, so they don't belong there. Well, they couldn't catch up with killing them as fast as they were breeding on the hunting programs that the wildlife conservation groups had. And then they caught on trail cams, the coyotes started hunting the giant snakes. It would hit them after they had eaten, so they were sort of lethargic, and then they would pounce and then eat its brains and then once its brains and it's dead at that point, then they devour the snake. And then they caught them, they would open it up and eat what it had just eaten before it had digested it. And so the coyotes have started hunting in groups to attack large snakes. And then they're doing the same thing in Texas and that region of America. They have problems with feral hogs. And they're wild enough and big enough that old women and children have been killed just because they were in the wrong place at the right time by stampedes and such. They have whole companies where their whole job is fly around in helicopters with guns and shoot them, but they can't kill them as quick as they're breeding.
Wow.
It's a real problem. Well, they caught on trail cam again who knew the cameras that I'm generally not against being everywhere would catch this kind of stuff. And they were hunting in packs. One of the coyotes would lead the adult boars away. The other two more would be like lookouts, and the rest of them would go and they'd eat the young. And so they're cutting it off at the source and decimating the population that were causing such destruction on the farming and all of that, because the coyotes stopped being singular solitary creatures and started pack behavior, which is just fascinating, right? Because it's evolution in real time.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Absolutely.
That's right. It's
in Florida, one of those states where
right.
keen on evolution. Right here, look.
Yeah.
Walk out the door. There it is.
Part of the reason Florida gets a bad rap is because they have what they call the Sunshine Law, which means that they don't keep a lot of stuff secret. So if you do something stupid in Virginia and North Carolina and Utah, generally speaking, it's hard to get that information from police blotters. In Florida, they just release all of it. They got no shame.
Florida man is definitely a thing. Yeah,
but that's because they release everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they've got that, and they recently caught in the Everglades apes. Primates of some sort. It's been a while since I read that article, but primates of some sort were starting to fight other primates for territory using tools they made, which was interesting as well. But that's just a weird tangent because that has implications for fun plot ideas for sci-fi.
Well, I'm a huge fan, besides original Star Trek, of classic Planet of the Apes, and in the third film, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, where the evolved apes from the future had come back to the present. The plan was to release them clandestinely into the Florida Everglades, where they could live in peace and not be, hunted and killed by paranoid humans.
Interesting.
Didn't work out. They were hunted and killed by paranoid humans, but it was the idea. The plan was the Everglades.
Interesting. Now, since you're a dinosaur fan, did you ever watch the series Primeval?
So that's very interesting. I was great friends with Garfield and Judith Reeves Stevens, still am, who were two of the writers on Primeval. Yes, it was an interesting series for sure. I actually, more than just a dinosaur fan, my original career goal was to be a vertebrate paleontologist.
Oh, nice.
Good plan.
I wanted to be Indiana Jones when I grew up, and then I found out it was nothing like the movies.
Right, archaeology. That's not paleontology, but
right. But I'm just like I get you, like that same general concept of digging.
Like, that, but it was, it is, as I said, with Stegosaurus. It's alien life, unlike anything we have today, and it did exist. We're not sure, we cite mathematical probabilities, but we have no hard evidence that there's any life anywhere else in the universe. But there was life, unlike life that's around today, that did exist in the past, and we can study it and try to figure out its ecology, its lifestyle, fascinating detective work where you're trying to find clues to piece it all together. I would have enjoyed that career quite a bit, I think, but I chickened out and decided to be a writer instead. And of course, that career worked out very well for me. I mean, I've been so fortunate to be a full-time professional science fiction writer for over 30 years now.
Yeah. I mean, you live in the dream, sir. All right. So normally this is the part, because I'm curious, before we transition to talk about the book that brought us here, you obviously have developed your love of science fiction and speculative fiction writ large from a young age. Is that something you found on your own? Was it fostered by your parents? How did you come to discover the space?
So my dad was a huge impact on this, and he was not a science fiction fan. But in 1968, when I was just 8 years old, he took me to see 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I certainly didn't understand it at that point. I think I understand it quite thoroughly now, because I've seen it like almost 30 times on the big screen. But I just loved it. Also in the 60s, that's when the original Star Trek was airing. And it was the backdrop of course, the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo space programs. So that was my childhood. But I was going to summer camp in 1972, 12 years old. And my dad thought, well, he's watching the science fiction stuff on TV. Maybe I'll get him some books to take to summer camp. And he went off, and he didn't know anything, but he went to the science fiction section at we had a bookstore walking distance from our home, and there was a name he did know, Isaac Asimov. He knew that name because Asimov wrote tons of nonfiction, including at that point it was a 2-volume book called Asimov's Guide to Science, not science fiction, to science. My dad had as a reference book. Okay, I'll get into that. One of Asimov's robot short story collections. And then there's another name here that which I find, well, this guy, David Gerald, it says he wrote for Star Trek. Rob likes Star Trek, got me these things, and I got hooked on reading science fiction. You know, once we get off the phone here or the Zoom, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my evening is lie on the couch and, you know, read, because it's what I love. I watch film and television science fiction. I'm a fan, have worked in the industry, but the books are my first, they weren't my first love, but they are my best love.
Did you ever get into the audiobooks as well, or do you still prefer to read the book you can hold in your hand?
Well, the Downloaded was commissioned by Audible to be an Audible original, and its sequel, the Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine, that came out last year in Audible, earlier this year in print. Both of those were originally conceived of and commissioned by Audible. They came to me and said, you know, we like your novels. We would love you to write something original for us. And back in the day, I'd written radio drama for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, among other things. So absolutely, all of my books, all 26 of my novels, are available as audiobooks. The Downloaded and the Downloaded 2 are particularly near and dear to my heart because we got Brendan Fraser as our lead narrator, the Academy Award winner, and he was, you know, just spectacularly good at bringing my words to life, and also just a joy to work with. So yeah, absolutely. I'm a big consumer of audiobooks. I was an audiobook consumer, one of the very first, back before. Now almost everybody who does audiobooks do them on their phone, right, with an app on their phone. Back when I started with Audible, I was one of their original subscribers. You had to buy an MP3 player from them. They had a little player they called the Otis, about the size of, I don't know, a Tic Tac container that you know, could hold 1 or 2 audiobooks. But even before that, before there was even Audible, I was a consumer of audiobooks, books on tape, cassette tapes. I had a cassette player in my automobile. So yeah, love that format.
And those gigantic folders that held all the tapes, because very often it took,
right, exactly.
It was a really great book. It took more than one tape, and so it'd tell you, okay, now you got to eject it and flip it over, and that's where I started too. Was record players, and then up to the books on tape, and and you just went along with this huge folder full of them, and then eventually CDs, and same kind of problem. And
that's right.
Now it's amazing. It's like my husband just puts it on his phone, and we can listen to old time radio for hours.
It's wonderful. Now that stuff is public domain, and there's tons. Yes. There's a great old time science fiction radio program from the 50s called X-1. The letter X hyphen, and then the word minus hyphen 1. X-1. About a third of the episodes were adaptations of then contemporary science fiction short stories by the masters, by Bradbury, by Frederick Pohl, by Asimov, Heinlein. And all of that is public domain, and you can easily find it, and they're terrific, absolutely terrific.
Yeah, I remember when I was touring colleges, and maybe this is an East Coast thing, because we would go at Cracker Barrels, and you could rent the book. So you pay full price for the book, and you listen to it, and then when you get to the next Cracker Barrel, you turn it in, and they give you like 2/3 of your money back.
Right. Yeah.
And so I listened to a lot of books traveling to and from college. You know, the first stop on my way home from college on every break was the Cracker Barrel, even if I wasn't getting anything but a drink for the road, because I was going to get an audiobook. I listened to so many of Brad Thor and Clive Cussler books.
Oh yeah.
On the road. Yeah. And he has so many, but all of his books are episodic, so you could catch any book in any order, and it didn't really matter.
Right.
Which is great when you're listening sporadically, because we know when you're in college, nobody has time to read for fun, generally speaking. So, all right. So obviously we're here to talk about your.
Just to be obnoxious. I kept up with all my studies, but I also kept reading, because back in those days I didn't need to sleep nearly as much as I do now that I am older than I was then. And there were a whole lot of all-nighters or close to all-nighters that were spent with a book, and I'm doing this thing with the little flashlight so I don't wake up my roommates, and totally worth it. Every single minute spent reading those.
So I had obligations because I was in the Guard, and I had a job. Plus, I was on the rugby team, so like I didn't have a lot of free time after class. And I took 24 credit hours a semester.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. All right, so obviously we're here to talk about your book, Sawyer on Science Fiction, which is the sponsor of today's episode. So let's just dive into the book. And can you tell us what this book is?
Yeah, so this is a nonfiction book about science fiction. Over the years, I've written 26 novels, but also been repeatedly asked to write a column, or I had columns in 2 different science fiction magazines, ongoing columns, 3 different ones. Or introductions to somebody else's book. I've done introductions to books by Lois McMaster-Bujold and David Brin, Jack McDevitt, David Gerald, all kinds of wonderful writers. And I thought, well, why don't I collect all of this stuff? And it ended up being a gigantic book, 225,000 words, about the length of, well, 1 huge epic fantasy novel or 3 normal science fiction novels, 2 or 3. And it's 177 individual pieces, columns, essays, op-eds from newspapers, introductions to other people's books, introductions to my own books about science fiction, accumulated over almost 40 years of writing about the field. A lot of stuff about the literature, some stuff about media, science fiction. And I'm very excited. The book comes out August 4th in ebook and in print. We're having a launch in Calgary in August, a launch at the World Science Fiction Convention in Anaheim, also in August, and a launch here where I live in Toronto in September. But, you can pre-order now, Sawyer, that's like Tom, Sawyer, Sawyer on Science Fiction. If your local bookstore isn't stocking it, just ask them to order it. Any bookstore can order any book for you from a traditional publisher with 2 clicks of their mouse. So don't be hesitant to go up and say, I want to get a copy. Support your local independent. Go up and say, I heard this guy on blasters and blades, and it's called Sawyer on Science Fiction. They look it up, boom, they can get it for you.
So is this exploring the genre, like more broadly speaking, or are you diving into some of the science behind the science fiction?
I cut out all of the stuff that was not about the fiction. So my first cut of the book was 300,000 words.
Oh, good. All right, Brandon Sanderson.
That's great. And I know Brandon. This is,
Does he know that he's been turned into a joke about the length of his books? Like that's become a joke.
Oh, he's aware.
Yeah. But we should all be so lucky to have his fan base.
Oh, absolutely.
But I cut out all the stuff that was just on science. So no, it's stuff about what I think the science fiction genre should be. Speeches I've given, I gave a speech in 1999 at the Library of Congress called "The Future Is Here," or "The Future Is Already Here." Is there a place for science fiction in the 21st century? And I think it makes a very interesting reading about whether science fiction still had a role to fill after we had kind of entered the age of computers and robots and all this sort of thing. A speech I gave at the University of Oxford, and articles I did for Slate and the science journal Science, columns I did for the Canadian science fiction magazine On Spec, the American one Galaxy's Edge, the well-regarded fanzine Bixfazine, just all kinds of stuff. There'll be something in that book for everybody who's interested in science fiction, whether it's as a reader or as a writer.
Did you
people will, they may not agree with me, but at least they will hopefully find the opinions engagingly expressed and with good humor.
Absolutely. Humor can get you everywhere and get you out of a lot of trouble. Don't ask me how I know.
That's right.
So how did you organize it? Did you organize them by theme, by the chronology of when you, okay.
Yeah. I looked at it and it took me forever to figure out. Chronologically, no, I didn't want to do that because, you don't want to start a book with stuff that's, I have a piece on the computer graphics that were done in Toronto for the Search for Spock in '84. Well, that's before most people who are probably going to read the book, or many of them, were even born. And who cares what the technology of computer graphics was like in 1984? So I started with some of my strongest opinion pieces, then went into my best speeches, and then went into, future of the genre, how to write the genre, introductions to other people's books, and so forth.
So do you feel like when you look at what makes good science fiction, is it the brand theme, like the brand scope of ideas, the big scoping ideas, or do you think it's the science behind the science fiction that should lead? Because obviously, like, both matter, but which one do you think takes precedent?
No, actually, I put those two into one lump, and you're missing the other important ingredient, which is character.
Okay.
And I'm a huge believer that the job of good science fiction is to combine the intimately cosmic, the grandly cosmic, with the intimately human.
Okay.
To make it, I want you to think and feel. I want to expand your brain and also tear at your heartstrings, or make you laugh, or make you feel, warm and fuzzy inside, or whatever's the appropriate emotion for the story. But I certainly start my research with the science, and then I extrapolate from that, from real science, to a plausible extrapolation of that science. So I'm what they call a hard science fiction writer. Doesn't mean that the science is difficult. It means that the science is rigorous, that I'm not waving my hand and making up crap as I go along.
So you do not.
And I'm saying, oops, go ahead.
So you, I was just say, so you don't subscribe to the school of handwavium?
I do not. I think what gives science fiction its moral authority to comment on societal issues is the fact that it is plausible.
Okay.
Say, this might plausibly happen. So when we write, or my colleagues write, let's say, or the great giants whose shoulders I stand on, and you look at some of the greatest works of science fiction, of course, are cautionary tales. They are Brave New World. They are 1984. They are, to name a fellow Canadian, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. They are works that we could say, if we don't do course corrections as we go along here, these are the dystopias that we might end up with. I tend to be a much more optimistic writer. So I'm saying, if you make course corrections here and here, we can end up with a much more utopian future than otherwise we're going to end up with. But either way, we want people to take our predictions and our warnings seriously, and it's the believability of what we write that makes that possible, that makes it possible to say, no, you can take this seriously. Whereas if you wave your hands and say, somehow magically we're going to deal with, you name the crisis that we're facing today, well, that doesn't help me at all to get out of the mess that I'm in right now. What plausible steps should we be taking to deal with the rise of authoritarianism, the rise of intolerance, the rise of my voice is hoarse today because of climate change. What are we going to do about that? All of these issues we talk about in science fiction with, I think, moral authority to talk about them, because we're grounded in real, rigorous scientific extrapolation.
Which is where you get the meme science fiction author says, in my book, I invented the Torment Nexus as a cautionary tale. So the tech company, at long last, we have created the Torment Nexus from classic science fiction novel. Don't create the Torment Nexus.
Absolutely. The tech bros in Silicon Valley all were indeed huge science fiction fans, but so many of them missed the point.
Michael Crichton tried to tell us.
Unfortunate. Because, the working title for Sawyer on Science Fiction, the book we're talking about, my nonfiction collection, was Cassandra Screaming. Cassandra was the female prophet from Greek mythology who had been blessed with the ability to foretell the future, but cursed that nobody would listen to her, that nobody believe her. And I feel that science fiction writers, not just me, but me and my colleagues and the generations before us, warned us about climate change, about the rise of authoritarianism, about the curtailing of civil liberties, about invasion of privacy, about the rise of AI and the pitfalls of that. about worldwide plagues. We warned you and said, if we don't watch out for this, we're going to fall into these traps. And then we fell into all these traps, and people say, why didn't anybody warn us about this? And we are collectively Cassandra's screaming. But the publisher felt that wasn't going to sell the book, that Sawyer, my name on science fiction, would do a better job of it.
It definitely is a lot more illiterate. It rolls off the tongue
for sure. And one of the books that preceded mine, that was a similar kind of collection of essays about science fiction, called after you had enough of them, was Asimov on science fiction. Book came out, I'm going to say in the early 90s, and was mostly a collection, or maybe exclusively a collection, of his essays, the monthly essays he did for the magazine that still bears his name, Asimov Science Fiction Magazine.
Yeah, I have that one. It is a fantastic read.
What a great read, right? And it's, eclectic. You never know what each essay is going to be about, but it's always some fascinating aspect of the science fiction genre. I like to think that I've been true to that model in this book, Sawyer on Science Fiction.
So if you've noticed, dear listener, that I'm stumbling on the words a little bit, when the migraines happen, the TBI gets a little bit worse, so just bear with me. But one of the things that I like about science fiction is how aspirational it can be. And we'll use Star Trek as an example because you wrote for them, and we nerded out when Jana froze about Star Trek, and you inspired that upcoming panel. Just look at how much technology was invented by scientists who watched Star Trek and were like, I wonder if we could really do that. And so they figured it out.
That's right. The classic example is the old flip phone, which is making a bit of a comeback as people want to get away from all the social media and all the other distractions. But also, the diagnostic bed from the original Star Trek, where above the bed in sick bay, there's a panel with all these readouts being taken, passively without having to constantly people hooked up to physical sensors. We now have a lot of that technology. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of engineers who will look at a science fiction show and say, that's cool. And then say, I wonder how they could do that. And then say, here's how. And we get that eventually brought to us in the real world. And so
they did DARPA here is a defense research agency. I don't know if you've got the equivalent.
Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Right. They run the X Prize every year. And one year they did one where it was to create a functional tricorder, which was the handheld diagnostic tool from Star Trek. And somebody actually won. Now, it was limited in scope of what it could diagnose, but what it was programmed to do, it could diagnose it relatively quickly, which, if I remember correctly, because it's almost 10 years ago now that they won, but it was like basically the kind of things that new moms freak out about, where they could just diagnose it and rule it out really quickly to save, wasted time and man hours in pediatric clinics where it turns out it's minimal stuff. And so it was one of the scientists that was on the team that invented it was a new mom, which is why they got that angle. And so I don't know why they didn't call it the pacifier as their name for it, but they did not go that direction. And then, of course, you've got the famous Alcubierre drive calculation.
Right, which essentially is a kind of warp drive.
Right, which is exactly that's what he was trying to do, is figure out if it was possible to make the warp drive. And he concluded.
And the thing about that is it's interesting because we talk about plausibility in science fiction. And then there are those who will say, yeah, but you can't travel faster than the speed of light. So science fiction is just fantasy. And Obicare comes along and says, here's a good theoretical framework. And, we had sort of three gimmies that were given to us historically in science fiction. One was faster than light travel. The other was time travel, which you can find, stuff in the physics literature that argue maybe we could make it happen. But I don't tend to believe in time travel, although I have written about it. And the third one was psychic powers. And it's very interesting how that got co-opted into science fiction. The principal editor of the leading science fiction magazine, it's still published under the name Analog, but in the 1930s and 40s, actually right into the early 60s, his name was Astounding Stories. And the editor through all that time was John W. Campbell Jr. And Campbell happened to have done his university undergraduate at Duke University in, I guess, North Carolina, I think.
It's in North Carolina, yeah.
Was the only university in the United States that had a serious scientific investigation into psychic powers. They were considered, it was considered legitimate science, telepathy, ESP, and all that stuff. Most of the research that came out of there has been sort of debunked and shown to be flawed. But because Campbell came out of that crucible, he said, yeah, I'll allow faster than light travel, I'll allow time travel, and I'll allow psychic powers in my science fiction stories. It's now very rare to see a science fiction story that has telepathy in it. We've sort of ceded that territory to our colleagues who write fantasy, by and large.
The other one that we've started allowing for the screen, and it just sort of worked its way in, is the artificial gravity as a default.
And that is one of the hardest puzzles, right? Except there are only two ways that we can simulate it, and they're very effective. One is just constant acceleration. If you keep your spacecraft's engines firing all the time, you will continue to accelerate. And as long as you're continuing to accelerate, being pushed from the back, you'll feel a downward pressure and you'll have a simulated gravity. The other is centrifugal force, just spinning around. They work, but this idea that it's easy to have, like they have on Star Trek, the Enterprise, the primary hull, the saucer shape, the original Enterprise, 11 decks thick. Yeah. Well, where's the gravity generator? Is it on the bottom of the 11 decks? Then is gravity less on the bridge than it is down in the phaser firing control room on deck 11? No, if you have it on every deck, then why doesn't the gravity from the ceiling above pull you up to, there's no good rational explanation for artificial gravity, but it is so much cheaper to film that.
Absolutely.
I was pleased to see in Project Hail Mary, the movie, that they tried to adhere to the very meticulous use of centrifugal force in Andy Weir's novel that the movie is based on.
I watched a video.
Just ignored. Just take it. Every time you see a spaceship that's traveling this way with people standing up like this, it's just not the way. You would be, if you're traveling that way, you're going to be feeling the gravity this way, not down that way. You're going to feel it horizontally, not vertically if you're traveling horizontally.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what's cheaper to film, and then we just went with it.
Absolutely. And it's why most aliens on Star Trek and everywhere else are humanoid, or humanoid bodies in a rubber mask, Even Greedo, right? From the original Star Trek, who shot first. I was there. 70. Greedo shot first. No, sorry. Han shot first. Han shot first. Greedo was an innocent clone away. Not innocent, but Han shot first. Even that's just a humanoid body with a crazy rubber mask on it.
It's also why all alien planets look like Canada. Stargate taught us that.
Yes, they do. They absolutely do.
Yeah, depending on where you can get filming rights. And also, with some of those, if we filmed it the way that it would be, it makes people sick. Because I know there are some of the shows that they try very hard to pull that, okay, we're going to show what would be like without the artificial gravity. I can't watch them because it's like watching shaky cam, and there's only so much you can take as far as visual. But yeah, it's one of those questions that we have. If we can figure out faster than light, then we assume that means we're going to be able to figure out a gravity that makes it so that people can move about the ship and do the things that they're going to need to do.
Did come up with a good model for fast and light travel. Nobody has come up with a good model for anti-gravity other than acceleration, constant acceleration, or centrifugal force, which do indeed work, but are not, in many cases, practical solutions.
So the other thing is you're starting to see, not just with the technology that people say, hey, let's do this, some of the medical stuff. Like, so there's a doctor who's his medical expertise is the skeletal structure stuff as his expertise, but he also has a YouTube channel. I'll find his information and link him to your listener. I bookmarked him, but like he's a sci-fi nerd. So he looked at like Warhammer 40K and Halo, and he's like, what would it take to make the Spartans from Halo or the Space Marines from Warhammer? And he broke it down from a medical and would have to do it in these steps, and it could be done, but you couldn't realistically do it because you'd have to violate so many medical ethics, because while the end result is very plausible and possible, your your rate of fail would be so high, somebody would die.
Yeah.
That it would just be unethical.
It's funny you should mention that, because one of the things I say, the value of science fiction is a laboratory for thought experiments that would be impossible, impractical, or unethical to perform in real life. You can write a science fiction story about, creating the ideal future warrior, even if 90% of your candidates die, because you can do that thought experiment. If the now currently named Department of War decided that they wanted to do that, in most civil governments, that would be considered, you would shut it down immediately. You wouldn't be allowed to do it. So, yeah.
And even in the, I don't know if Warhammer got into it, because I've only read a couple of their books, but I know in Halo, in the lore, even then they showed like there were horrific consequences, and they had a huge like washout rate because they died or they had like horrific injuries. So at least with the Halo lore, they addressed the horrific nature of it. They dressed it up in that universe as well. It was the needs of the government because they were an existential threat. But I find it fascinating when you get actual experts to start looking at stuff. And I don't imagine in every one of those situations, the author was like, hey, I bet this is possible. They were just like, oh, this sounds cool. Let me do it. And then someone else figured it out at the back end.
Maybe, and in film and TV, maybe. I really think that my serious colleagues, like me, Alan Steele, Robert Charles Wilson, Julie Trineda when she's writing science fiction, Catherine Asaro, some of the great modern hard science fiction writers, we really, if we come up with a cool idea, we will do the work. And if we can't figure it out ourselves, we will go to the experts and get as much engineering and science and medical advice as we need. And you'll see in the acknowledgments of our books the names of the people we consulted. Because, again, we come back to it. Believability is what it's all about.
Well, I wasn't actually speaking about hard science fiction, because I just assume if it's hard science fiction, they do the research.
Right.
I was talking more like the Handwavium ones.
Yeah. In Handwavium, you just make it up.
But even the ones that you just make it up, sometimes inadvertently get it right because some scientist or engineer or whatever, like you said, it's like, hey, I wonder if this is possible, and then they find out, it actually is.
Well, like Star Trek's transparent aluminum from Star Trek 4 was a bit of Handwavium. And then the idea, well, can we make, metals that you can see through? They also, by the way, figure, they don't call it transparent aluminum, it's xenonite, but they have a transparent metal, essentially, in Project Hail Mary as well, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we get inspired, for sure, by what we see in film and television and read in science fiction books.
And if you want to check that...
Sometimes we just don't take it that far, because you talk about, could we build the super soldier, that kind of thing. Well, maybe we're not ethically going to do that, but the seed there does lead to other things. I have titanium discs in my back that make it work correctly. And it used to be they just had to fuse your spine when you blew out a disc. And now I've got one that it's a titanium disc and a titanium disc and a special plasticized rubber that goes in the middle that has full flexibility.
That's right.
That comes from those science fiction ideas that say, yeah, you could take it to this extreme, but what can we practically do? Well, we can practically make it so I have full functionality in my back. That disc that I've got that's an artificial disc is better than any of the other discs. It will outlive me. And it has a little serial number on it, so someone could dig me up at some point and, tell exactly where that came from. And then the work they did to get it in there, it's all robotically assisted. And so they were able to do a lot less damage as they went in. The scarring is less. There's so many things that, we look at that extreme, but that extreme is the seed of the thing that is actually very practical.
We live, as Paul Simon said, in the age of miracle and wonder.
It's amazing.
And so just because I mentioned a dear listener, it's Dr. Chris Raynor is the YouTube channel. It's Chris Raynor MD is his YouTube channel. If you want to check it out, he breaks down all of, like, he looks at all the movies and he breaks down the science behind it. Like, could you really survive that fall in this movie where the guy walks away, that kind of stuff. It's because he's a nerd who likes the science fiction stuff. And it's like, hey, I wonder what's real and what's not. There's a book out there that I can't find anymore, but I remember reading when I was on summer break in college, just like the science of Halo, where they literally broke down like the science behind the lore, which some physicist was just bored. It's like, oh, are these Halo rings feasible? What would that look like? And there's a whole series of those books.
Yes, the first such book was The Science of Star Trek, written by my friend Lawrence Krauss, Krauss.
Is she one of your Canadian friends?
He happens to be Canadian. That's very. He works in the States. But yes, he's Canadian-born, I believe. Yeah.
There you go. But yeah, I find those books fascinating because on the one hand, like, I like to get nerdy. I don't try to write hard sci-fi. I like the hand wavium. I'll invert the dilithium crystals all day long, right? Like, it's fun.
Right.
I focus on the people and the tactics when I write mill sci-fi. But when I see people that also do that and they sometimes inadvertently stumble into rightness, it makes it that much better, right?
Sure.
And I think that's where you get some of that. Or where people are like, this is a crazy idea, but if we did, insert whatever, we can make it work. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Has anything that you've ever speculated in your early work of science fiction come true since then?
Oh,
since
yeah, YouTube. I called it desktop TV, but I said everybody will be a TV producer. I said that in 1995 in my novel, The Terminal Experiment, way before there was any such thing, before there was the World Wide Web. So yeah, lots of things that I predicted in technology, and also people are always astonished that I was able to predict the name of Pope Benedict before he ascended to the papal throne. How did you know what the next pope's name was going to be? Well, you look at all the names of popes in the past, scratch off the ones who've disgraced themselves, look for whose name, what name is due for a comeback, and you increment it by one. It's not that hard, but yeah, tons and tons of things. I essentially predicted DoorDash, Skip the Dishes, that there would be, you could order any kind of food item delivered at any time of the day or night. Absolutely.
What is Skip the Dishes? I'm not familiar with
that.
It's
a Canadian, maybe it's Canadian. It is an equivalent of Uber Eats, or DoorDash, or one of these places where, third parties take care of the delivery from your favorite restaurant. They're not the delivery drivers of the restaurant, but they're jobbers the way that Uber drivers and Lyft drivers are.
Right. I got you. Is there anything that you got right that you wished you hadn't in your writing?
Yes. A lot of the negative stuff about artificial intelligence, for sure. There was a lot of warning in my work that AI was going to have an enormous impact, some of it very positive, but the impact it was going to have on the workplace was going to be devastating. So absolutely, I wish that warning had been heeded. I realize that you're both veterans here, and as we happen to speak right now
is not me.
on another channel, your commander-in-chief is giving an address to the nation. But I did predict the rise in that novel that came out in 2016 of an authoritarian United States president who might well be a psychopath who had designs on annexing Canada. And that certainly came to be true, much to my regret. I thought the warning signs, I didn't name Donald Trump. In an earlier novel, though, in a 1999 novel, I had, which was set in 2009, I had headlines. It was the novel Flash Forward. Headlines from the future that people saw. And one of them was that Donald Trump had just completed the largest pyramid in history to eventually house his remains, taller than the Great Pyramid, of Cheops, because he wanted this monument to himself. So I predicted some of his grandiosity was going to get, just bigger and bigger decades before he actually started building all these monuments to himself. So, yeah, I wish those things had not come true. I wish Canada and the United States were the great friends they were until, astonishingly, It's just 2 years ago that the friendship got broken, and quite conceivably irretrievably broken, by our best friend saying, hey, maybe we'll just take you over.
Did you
when to come back up from it? I did warn about it way back in 2016.
Did you see some of the predictive AI algorithms paired with LiDAR radars have found a second Gaza Sphinx in Egypt in the sand?
It's astonishingly good uses for AI. The bad uses are replacing people. You know, what we want automation for is to eliminate the jobs that nobody wants to do. And what we don't want is it taking away the things that give us joy. So absolutely. And we want, you know, every AI is really good at pattern recognition, which is part of this, finding archaeological sites. It's also finding buried, what we call them, paleo craters. You know, Earth was as covered with craters as the moon was in its early life. The you know, the heavy bombardment stage of the solar system formation left Mars, Mercury, Earth, and the moon just covered with craters. But most of ours are gone. But there are crater remnants that AI is really good at finding in geological maps and geological surveys that the best trained geologist has missed. If I, you know, if my wife needed a mammogram, as you know, we get one annually at her age, but for breast cancer screening, absolutely, I want an AI looking at it. It's absolutely clear that AI is better at early tumor detection than the best oncologist. Of course, there's uses for AI. What we don't want is AI stealing the things that give us dignity and joy, just so that some billionaire's pocket can make some more money while, you know, having an enormous environmental impact that, you know, AI and data farms, data centers are enormously harmful to the environment. Every time you ask a trivial question of an AI, literally you're doing an enormous disservice to our ecology.
So what do you hope? I mean, obviously, putting together Sawyer on science fiction is just the collected of all your nonfiction essays. But what were you hoping to get when you put it together? Because obviously there are stuff you clearly didn't include.
I want people to recognize how serious science fiction is as a literature. I don't mean it's not enjoyable. It's very much enjoyable. It's rollicking. It's fun. It's mind expanding. It gives you a sense of wonder that you can't get anywhere else short of a religious experience of feeling that the universe is just an incredible place. I want people who have dismissed science fiction as, and forgive me, but as hand wavy, as they just make that stuff up, to take a second thought and say, you know, these people who write it are very serious about their art form, about expanding its boundaries, of course, delivering entertainment. As my great Canadian colleague Spider Robinson says, we're competing for everybody's beer money, and beer is a big thing here in Canada. That, you know, you want, absolutely our job is to entertain, but that it is a serious form of social commentary, an important form of warning about new science and technological inventions and what the second and third and fourth order follow-on effects are going to be of those things, and that it's every bit as good literature and as ambitious an art form as any other form of writing you can name.
Yeah, that's one of the things we had to take, or I didn't have to. I took a philosophy class in college, and that was in undergrad. One of the things was, it's not just if this, then that, then what. It's if this, then that, then what. You got to think next steps. And I think that's when fiction falls flat, when they never say, okay, you did the thing and this happened, but then what happens next? And that's when they lose the plausibility factor, I think, a lot of times.
Theodore Sturgeon famously said he had for anything, ask the next question, right? Don't change the topic. He doesn't mean, he means, okay, but then what? Well, what about that? What about this impact?
It's the Socratic method.
Keep the Socratic method. Absolutely. They teach it still, I think, at Harvard Law School. It should be taught everywhere. Just keep asking the questions. Of course, people got fed up with Socrates, but it really is. But yeah, but what about the environmental impact? What about the human cost? What about the impact on our dignity? What about how it could possibly be misused by terrorists, by child abusers. I feel great empathy for Tim Berners-Lee, or sympathy, who was the one man who invented the World Wide Web. It was invented by a single person. He's now Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and he does head the World Wide Web Consortium, but he invented HTTP, the Hypertext Transport Protocol, that we prefix all of our web addresses with. He invented the hyperlink, and everything that came out of that is good and positive. Wikipedia, our podcast, a platform that we're using right now, great. But also, it is the number one tool for radicalization, the number one tool for disseminating disinformation, the number one tool for widely dispersing pornography and making it widely accessible to preschoolers. It's the number one tool for disseminating hatred. And he has got to be the most conflicted guy on the planet, because all he wanted to do, he was working at CERN, the European Center for Particle Physics, and he wanted a way for a researcher to not just say, see the paper by Smith et al. On this topic, but click where it says in the paper on C and have Smith et al.'s paper come up in the window. That's all he wanted to do, was make academic research easier, and instead he's become the agent responsible for, as I said, child pornography, child exploitation, all of the horrible things that are on the dark web and on the very public web, the pornography and radicalization that's all over social media and all sorts of public sites. He didn't ask the questions, where is this all going to lead? And I think a lot of the tech bros who have brought out AI on us in the last 2-3 years, even though they claim to have read science fiction, didn't ask the second, third, fourth order questions that Theodore Sturgeon or Socrates would have insisted that we just keep hammering away. Yeah, but what? Yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. That's the most important thing you can ask. Yeah, but what about? And science fiction is the literature of yeah, but.
So I suspect Socrates, when he came up with that, his method, had a toddler running around asking, okay, what, why? And I imagine the guy, if you're familiar with the story of Alfred Nobel, the Swedish chemist.
Of course I'm familiar with him, yes.
The Nobel Peace Prize. He was known as the
Nobel Prizes, not just the peace. The only one that he wasn't responsible for is economics. Yeah.
But he invented it because they accidentally ran an obituary early, and he was known as the Merchant of War because the dynamite he invented to make it safer for mining was used in war, and he hated that that's what his legacy was. So he invented the Nobel Prize.
Absolutely, that's right.
I imagine he was as conflicted too.
Just this, we're recording this in July of 2026. It's going to drop in August. But you just look at this past week where two very famous people passed away. Lindsey Graham and Sam Neill, the actor.
Oh, yeah, that would hit Sam Neill.
And you look at the difference of how the world responded. Lindsey Graham, yes, everybody does the pro forma. All the politicians have to on both sides of the aisle. But basically, he's being skewered alive online. And Lindsey Graham is being Sam Neill. And you got to ask yourself, Alfred Nobel actually got a mitzvah, a blessing that most of us will never have, which is to know in advance how history was going to remember us and have a chance for a course correction. It's almost a science fictional story what happened to him. He got to see how he was going to be eulogized and said, oh my God, I do not want to be remembered as the merchant of death. And he changed that now nobody remembers. I mean, it's a trivia question. Why is Alfred Nobel famous? Well, the prizes. Well, yeah, where did the money come from? Oh, well, he invented dynamite. So that's a trivia question. He's remembered for the Peace Prize, for the Literature Prize, for the Physiology and Medicine Prize. He changed the world for a better with those prizes. And what a wonderful legacy he ended up having.
Well, and I like that. And as we're coming, towards the end of our podcast, I think that is a good note to focus on, because we do see all of our cautionary tales But one of my favorite reasons that I read sci-fi and that I write sci-fi is because I love the hope and the way that it connects to the human spirit. And you talked about that character is such an important part of science fiction because we want the plausibility and that kind of thing, but we want those people who will boldly go where no one has gone before, who are going to put everything on the line to figure it out. And it's that thing that says, you know, no matter what comes up, no matter what the AI does or the aliens or this, that, and the other, the spirit of what humanity is such a central part of what science fiction is, to say there is a grand universe out there. And even though we're this tiny blue dot on the middle of an arm of a unremarkable galaxy, really, when you start comparing it, look at what we can do. And I love that about science fiction, that in the end, it is very hopeful because it says humanity is going to keep moving forward. They're going to discover new things. They're going to make their world better. Because even as we bring up when we say, oh, it can have all these bad effects, you also look at the iterations of, well, we're learning how to make this better with every single time because it's a new challenge. And I love that we can be challenged, that we can be more. And isn't that what science fiction teaches us, is that it's a great world out there?
I couldn't have said it better myself, Jana. In Sawyer on Science Fiction, one of the speeches that's reproduced is the one I gave at Cambridge University. And I say in that speech that the most wondrous prediction that science fiction makes is that there is a future for Homo sapiens. Yeah. Because you look around at the world today and that premise is very much in doubt. We say in science fiction that and to quote the ending title card from Star Trek The Motion Picture, the human adventure is just beginning. There are years, decades, centuries, millennia, geological eras ahead for us before the heat death of the universe. And let's hope that we all, in all that time, continue to live long and prosper.
I have one last question for the road
well,
about
your book. That's what we call a closer in the game, Handley.
I know, that is a closer.
But okay.
Well, no, because we want people to buy your book. So you mentioned, we talked about your absolute love of audiobooks. Are there any plans for you to make the audiobook where you read the audiobook? Because that would be killer.
Despite the hoarseness of my voice, because we happen to be in the wildfires are rampant around in Ontario where I am right now. I am one of the narrators in a minor part of the audiobooks of my novels, Wake, Watch, and Wonder. I am a professional broadcaster. I used to host a TV show in Canada and have narrated radio documentaries for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. But the bottom line is when you can get Academy Award winner Brendan Fraser, as I've been lucky enough to get, or some other fabulous professional audiobook narrators like Stefan Radecki and so forth, why? You know, I would rather spend the week or two that it would take in the recording studio for me to get 10 clean hours of audio, because we're just, you and I, Jenna, we're just chatting here, and I cough. That's fine. You say or whatever, that's fine. Ain't fine in an audiobook.
No, you gotta cut it.
Letter perfect narration, beat by beat. So I would just rather spend the time writing writing stuff, including the wonderful stuff that I've done for Audible, the Downloaded and the Downloaded 2, both available in print and ebook, but originally created for Audible, than spending my time in a recording booth. But I like watching while great actors like Brendan bring my stuff to life.
All right, so this is the part where we ask you where we can find you on the wild interweb so people can check you out and buy your stuff.
Well, as I said, I've been writing about this stuff before there even was an internet. So I was lucky enough. I was the first science fiction writer in the world to have a website, and that website is at sfwriter.com. S is in science, F is in fiction, writer.com. So you'll find up my stuff there. My name is Robert J. Sawyer. So search for that with the J. I'm the first hit on Google. J, the middle initial. It's also Robert J. Sawyer on Twitter, Robert J. Sawyer on Facebook, and you'll find me on Blue Sky, robertjsawyer.com over there. I'm all over the place. Easy to find. Robert J. Sawyer and Sawyer on Science Fiction. You can order it on your favorite online bookseller, your favorite brick and mortar, and any ebook vendor that you happen to use will be able to get it for you as well.
All right. And you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things: the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the TikTok, the Twitter. We've got our Spotify, our Discord, our Substack, our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Madam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, the Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment sections for the podcast. These episodes aren't free to produce, and every penny counts, and we greatly appreciate your patronage. And with that, we would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And with that, thank you for coming on, Robert. We're definitely inviting you back for this TOS panel we're going to plan. Any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts from you? This is your chance to nail it without me interrupting.
I think "live long and prosper" is one of the greatest phrases ever coined. It comes from original Star Trek. May we all live long and prosper.
All right.